The Palestinian statehood will ultimately depend on Israel, I think, because it will always, as far as we can tell, be in such a position of power that it can disrupt and
Yeah.
stop any statehood happening that it doesn't want to see happening.
The eternal peace in the Middle East is the prize Donald Trump is searching for, and he says Tony Blair is going to help get it. The president announced a 20-point peace plan alongside the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We've been talking about it all morning, but the Sun's editor-at-large, Harry Cole, was at the White House for the press conference and gave us his immediate thoughts.
There's a lot for the Israelis to swallow here, the idea of Hamas being able to lay down their arms and walk away unprosecuted. A lot for the Israeli public to swallow there, but a 72-hour deadline put for the return of the hostages, which is such a key issue for Netanyahu's survival as leader of Israel and for the Israeli people. They didn't take questions, which I thought was a very interesting sign. They spoke for around 45 minutes, the pair of them, but did not take any questions, which would point to me as this deal is not as solid as it looks. And as we've seen with Ukraine and Putin, we get these big flourishes where the president of peace unveils his plans for peace only for one side not to come to the table. But all eyes on Hamas now and whether they will accept these terms. But a landmark moment, yes. But whether it's actually peace in our time remains to be seen.
That's Harry Cole there. Let's speak to Richard Spencer, the Times correspondent, who's really guided us through the conflict for the last few years or so. Richard, morning to you.
Good morning.
Is there a central problem here? We've been talking about a lot this today, that this relies to a certain extent on altruism if we think this is going to happen. Hamas would have to give up their weapons for the sake of the Palestinian people. It doesn't look plausible. Netanyahu would eventually have to concede the existence of a two-state solution that would ultimately kill his coalition and render him politically powerless. Are either of those things likely?
Yeah, I somewhat disagree with Harry's analysis, I have to say, and the second half of your question. The wording is quite careful, as always. These things with these things. Israel and Netanyahu have never formally ruled out a two-state solution. So to say that they will at some stage in the future consider a two-state solution isn't actually the concession it seems to be. What Netanyahu says, it won't happen under his watch, and it's hard to see at the moment with the direction of Israeli politics of that happening under future watches. So I don't think that's a concession by Israel. On the other side, yes, I mean, this is a repackaging of Israel's demands in terms of Hamas laying down its weapons, surrendering, returning the hostages, and so on. I mean, that's been the demand from day one for Hamas to surrender. Of course, they have somewhat more incentive to surrender now in that, in the meantime, Gaza has been utterly destroyed. I think
we just lost his. I think we'll just get him back there. I think the point I was trying to make was also that I think Netanyahu is not going to concede that precisely, and as Richard was saying there, that it's not under his watch is the point that he made about it. Well, I'll ask Richard in a moment about the involvement of Tony Blair, Kate, because Tony Blair is an interesting figure in all of this. People are saying, well, there's echoes of the post-Iraq war, the coalition, Arab support, US, UK coming together a bit. Tony Blair. I'm not sure that's an echo anyone wants to hear, though, do they?
Well, I think, look, at the end of the day, this is the first stage in a process that many people have said is impossible. And I think, in the coming days and weeks, we will have to see how this progresses. And there is now a very firm timeline, isn't there, for Hamas to follow? Well,
Richard's back, actually. That seems to be the critical question here, Richard. What follows now? Because the point you were making when we lost you, I think, was why would Hamas walk away? Because they feel presumably they're surviving and therefore winning, or they're making people turn on Israel. Why would they voluntarily give up their arms and sort of give up their control?
Only because of the pressure they're facing, really. They have internal pressure. At some stage, there's got to be an exit point for the Palestinian people. And
do you think that's going to happen?
Never say never, and it's Hamas are under pressure. That at some stage there must be some consideration that they need some sense of continuing support in the Arab world, and the Arab world very much wants an end to this war. So it is possible, but I can't see it happening under these terms because it would be such a humiliation for those Hamas leaders that are still alive in Gaza, and it's hard to see what future there is for them under this plan, either in Gaza or outside of Gaza, where they would be at risk of future assassination by Israel.
And just finally, in this plan, if it were to transpire, would there be a sort of a transitional authority, this board of peace, with the idea that there would be a Palestinian state at the end of it? Is that where this eventually goes if it were to work?
I think it's something of a pretense. I think there is an outline there of some of the procedures that might happen that at the end of this war. At some point, there has to be at the end of this war, and unless Israel does want to occupy Gaza and take total responsibility for it, which it doesn't, there will have to be some sort of procedure to set up a new governing body. So this is some ideas that are going to be thrashed around and discussed. The Palestinian statehood will ultimately depend on Israel, I think, because it will always, as far as we can tell, be in such a position of power that it can disrupt and stop any statehood happening that it doesn't want to see happening.
Yeah, I think that we're taking from this caution that this is not quite as a done deal as probably President Trump would like people to believe. Richard, good to speak to you as ever. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Richard Spencer, the Times correspondent there. Kate, and this question of to be an actual state, you've got to have your own army. You've got to have the ability to make foreign policy decisions. And it's just hard to imagine a world from where we are now with all that's happened in the last 2 years, and particularly October 7th, where Israel will be very happy for there to be a Palestinian armed state that it feels it can coexist with.
I think so much depends on what happens next in terms of Hamas's response to this, and crucially how the process works of removing Hamas militants, Hamas fighters from the region if they do not want to surrender. I mean, I think that process is still complex, and there are many, many questions about it. But again, it's one of those stories that over the next couple of days, as that deadline ticks down, we will keep a very close eye on here.